Good afternoon and good evening, everyone, and good morning to Latin America and North America. Welcome to the second session of Fostering 1.5 Degrees Lifestyles with Urban Partnerships event. In the morning, in our morning in Europe, we had the high-level event with really important and exclusive participants coming from many different organizations, from the business side, from the national policymaking, from local governments, discussing what it means 1.5 degree lifestyles, how to get there, what are the policy mixes. And we also sent some messages for COP26. We had the UNFCCC climate champion joining us, also having the launch of the climate action pathway, the human settlements pathway, covering this topic with clear actions towards 2030, 2050. We know from the studies, which we will be discussing once again, revisiting, remembering those facts, that 0.7 tons carbon equivalent per person by 2050 is our target, and it is a huge challenge. I mentioned that in the morning, that is almost one flight from Europe to the US. Very, very hard target. And how do we get there? Of course, cities have a huge role play. And we heard from actually our member cities, Glasgow, Essen. We heard some examples from Sweden. We know from our leading cities like Turku that there are actions being taken, but are they enough? How to really fasten the process, and what can individuals do? What are the challenges they are facing, so that we can support from the local level, from the national level, and of course get some help from circular economy thinking, keeping products longer time in use, designing them in an environmentally friendly way, low carbon way, and of course using the regeneration principle. So I'm so happy now that we can really do a deep dive into the learnings in 5 different countries in 6 different cities, and we have the representatives who have worked with really citizens, hand in hand with citizens, and they have brought their stories to us. So we are here to learn from the ICLEI network, but I also like to thank to IGES and of course Hot or Cool for their support in making this session happen. And last but not least, obviously UNEP, Sustainable Lifestyles Education Program through the Japanese government, who has funded and supported this project. So with that, we are very glad to have Garrett Clark, Miss Garrett Clark, to give us a few welcoming notes and help us remember where this all started. And let me tell you, Garrett is the Sustainable Lifestyles Program Officer at the Consumption Production Unit of the Economic Division of UNEP in Paris. And his expertise is vast, from clear production to sustained product development, and obviously now leading the work on sustainable lifestyles and education. She's also representing the UNEP on UN Environment on the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Committee of the 10-year framework program. We know shortly One Planet's Network on program of sustainable lifestyles and education. So there are many other projects like that, I suppose. Maybe you can tell us. And experience from sustainable tourism, design for sustainability that you are bringing also on the table, and all this to bundle in 5 minutes. I'm very happy to give you the word, Garrett, to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I won't go into any of those, but that's a very nice introduction that you did. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here to introduce this panel, which is exploring how to upscale sustainable living. Because when we think about it, at urban level, that's where living happens. That's where, whether we're individuals or in a household or in our jobs, whether we're parents or policymakers, businesses, educators, religious leaders, etc. That's where we all come into contact. It's where living happens. And this initiative that we're going to be exploring a bit is critical because it's testing a concept for action. It's looking at how we can upscale what we know needs to happen. In essence, it's translating theory into action. So with that kind introduction, it mentioned that this is all happening under the context of the One Planet Network Sustainable Lifestyles Program, which is co-led by Japan and Sweden. And UNEP sits on the multi-stakeholder advisory committee. And we contribute and work with different initiatives that the program is leading. Just so you know, the program is made up of voluntary key leaders within governments, experts, institutions that are really committed to harness how our daily decisions for sustainability can be better made for sustainability. It looks at taking the evidence, translating it into methodologies, approaches, and testing them, and then again, setting that framework for action. So we're going to hear a little bit more about in depth on this project, but I wanted to highlight some of the key points about our current situation, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but it's worth kind of combining as we start off. First of all, evidence is showing us that household decisions are associated with more than 70% plus of GHG emissions. And that's comparable when you also look at biodiversity concerns, pollution, etc. So households are where it is happening. Now, what we also know within households and decision-making is that the variety of choices that households have is different, meaning that there are some areas in the domains in which we live where people can make relatively easy decisions for living better and lighter, but others are more tied into the infrastructure or the systems within which our needs are met. And that's a different kinds of concern we need to take into account. We're also facing global signs of concern in a post-COVID context when we look that global advertising spending is forecast already to surge this year. From the 600 billion last year, it's already at a 20% plus in the first quarter, and it's targeting social media. So we know that since tomorrow's consumers are going to be mostly young, urban consumers who consume around food, phones, fashion, we need to look at the role of social media and how we can better harness it for providing examples, information, and sharing best practices. But it's an exciting initiative like the one we have today that shows us that there's a huge potential to harness household decision-making. So before we get into that, I also want to remind us all about what are people all about, because that's our ultimate target here, is that people don't, most of them, besides the people who may be here, who we are more perhaps more aligned with sort of sustainability thinking, the average person doesn't wake up to save the planet. Now, the good news is they don't wake up to hurt it either, but we need to keep that in mind. We know that every day there are millions of decisions that are taken, and for the lucky amongst us, it's around what we eat, where we live, how to get around, what to wear, what we do for fun. And no matter how we make these choices, it will determine our quality of life, how we reach our aspirations. It will influence the aspirations of others, and it will also have impacts on the planet as well as people around us. We also know, and as many of us in the sustainability field for many years, we know that communicating on the data, evidence, what's right, and what's happening to the people and planet does not necessarily lead to action. And we need to be very open and transparent about that. People don't change their behavior just because they should. So how can we better tackle that issue? We also need to recognize that the current economic system and accompanying aspirational messaging and pop culture are dominated by pro-consumption forces. So we need to encourage and take on the skills, talents, and stakeholders that influence the system. And maybe some of us who have been in the sustainability field for a while aren't used to taking on new stakeholder groups like media or influencers or the policy wildcards of tomorrow. But we need to make sustainable living irresistible to make change happen. Again, as we lead more into what today's panel is about, sustainable living is not just about individual choice or either. It's also about governments and businesses looking at policies and practices which will make sustainable living the default option, because not everyone is going to be able to or necessarily has to have a worldview and understanding of sustainability in order to live their lives. Living sustainably needs to be easy, accessible, affordable, and attractive. So we also, just to highlight a few things, and Berkeley was so friendly to allow me to give a few plugs for some of the other things that are happening that I'm very happy to put in the context for in the chat later. The Sustainable Lifestyles and Education program works on a variety of thematic areas. Primarily today, the work that's going to be highlighted is looking at that evidence about what we know is out there and how to apply and develop a framework for action. There's also a lot of work around educational efforts. So two efforts of particular interest might be in looking at the universities when we're looking at educating the decision makers for tomorrow, whether it's policy or business. There's work that's been done on a little green book of nudges, which looks at the university level of within the domains of sustainable living, food, mobility, housing, and leisure, looking at how students can activate ways within a university context to have awareness raising, as also to set a sustainability compass within their frameworks. And then working with the SLE team and many of the members of the program, many of whom are on today's call or WebEx, were also the Anatomy of Action, which is a social media toolkit which translate the action into doable actions that make sense in the 5 living areas. Now, I could cover many, many other activities, but I know the highlight is really to hear what is happening at local level. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Kujoma.
Excellent, Garrett. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing all the learnings. I think it's decades, I can say, of learnings that we are taking. Also for the ICLEI network, some of the points that were not mentioned in the morning. Yes, how to tackle the behavior change. We're looking into social sciences. You talk about how to also reckon pro-consumption forces and well, looking at the universities, working with the universities. And well, I'm a fan of Anatomy of Action, so please share the link. And yes, I underline again, we should go from theory to action. We know the theory, we talked about it, and it's about really making the difference now before it is too late. And please also share your views in the Q part, so we can maybe give some answers on the A side. If we cannot, we will harvest them and come back to you in the summary on ICLEI Circulars. That's the home of circular economy actions of our members and offices at ICLEI. And please also go and visit, if you cannot stay the whole time with us, World Congress site. And yeah, look, you can always listen to this recording. And let's, as Garrett said, let's move now to Kojima-san, whom you met in the morning. For those who haven't, Kojima-san, Dr. Satoshi Kojima, is a principal researcher at the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, IGES. And he has been at IGES since 2005. He led multiple projects, research projects on sustainable development policy and resource management. I'm happy to again invite Kojima-san to share their the project work, more about future lifestyles. To you.
Okay, thank you very much, Guruju. And then, yeah, hello everybody. My name is Satoshi Kojima of IGES. And then thank you, Garrett, for the excellent opening remark, which lays has a perfect background of this session. So together with my colleague Aditi, so we'd like to briefly explain the project. So that, yeah, so this project envisioning future low carbon lifestyles and then the transition instruments, which is it's in a sense it's a phase 2, second phase of 1.5 degree lifestyle project. So this morning we discussed about at the high level session that mainly the key concept and then some key findings from a phase 1 project, which focused on the national level. But now in this phase 2, we are more focusing on city level, and then also we emphasize importance of participatory approach. So next slide, please. So to focus on city level, so in this phase 2 project, first we select case studies like cities in 5 countries, Brazil, India, Japan, South Africa, and Thailand, with our partner institute, and then estimate current footprint and the mitigation potential of lifestyle options with city-specific data. So this is a uniqueness of second phase project. And then based on with participatory process through workshops with citizens, and then also household experiment of some lifestyle change options, we develop future scenario reflecting citizens' opinions. So the point is the scenario, future scenario will encourage citizens to realize lifestyle consistent with 1.5-degree target without sacrificing quality of life, and will deliver messages to other stakeholders to support lifestyle change. So this illustration shows apparently the collaborative effort by different stakeholders, not only citizens, households, but also business and the government, municipalities. So these are very important. Next slide, please. Then the point is, yeah, like there are, how to say, of course, we decide, we make a decision about our lifestyle, but how to say, there are many drivers which also, how to say, determine our lifestyle. So like local environmental life infrastructure or available products and services, and also rules of workplace, or rules of schools, or even rules of communities, which are very important. And of course, our own needs and the family needs. So these things are drivers of our lifestyle. So in the second phase project, we highlight the importance to think, test, learn, and share what we want to change and what we can change together as a community and a family. So that's why participatory approach plays a key role. Then, based on these activities, and propose the lifestyle, the 1.5-degree lifestyle with supporting measures for each city. Next slide, please. So actually, as I mentioned, yeah, in 5 countries, we selected 6 cities. Means in Japan, we have 2 cities, Kyoto and Yokohama, and in India, New Delhi, in Thailand, Nonthaburi, and in Brazil, Sao Paulo, and in South Africa, Cape Town. So these 6 cities are selected. Then we have say organize a citizen participating citizen workship, and then discuss future lifestyle. Then the participants are requested to implement lifestyle change options at home. So this is a household experiment. Then, based on the feedback, we develop future scenario draft. Then, again, we organize a follow-up workshop to also get the feedback from citizens. Next slide, please. Then, yeah, in 5 countries, so this, I just showed project partners. So in Brazil, CATU and then the University of Brasilia collaborated. And then in South Africa, ICRE South Africa. And then in India, Swisha, and then BITS Pilani. And then in Thailand, Chulalongkorn University. And then in Japan, the IGES and then also National Institute for Environmental Studies are collaborating. And then also the Finnish Institute, DMAT, and then also Hotaku are providing collaborating efforts. Next slide, please. Then just briefly, it's like a workflow in this phase 2. So as I mentioned, so in selected cities, we estimate the existing carbon footprint based on city-specific data. And then also estimated mitigation potential of lifestyle change options. Then based on this quantitative information, we develop workshop material like option catalog to explain the mitigation potential and then the contents of each lifestyle change option to workshop participants. Then we had a workshop. Because of COVID-19, actually, we organized an online workshop. Then also we asked the household experiment for each participant. Then based on this feedback from workshop and the household experiment, we developed a city scenario draft. Then we presented this draft to citizens again, workshop participant again through online workshop. Then we finalize city scenario. So this is a basic workflow of this project. Then about the key findings of this phase 2 project, I direct Aditi to make a presentation. So Aditi, please.
Given the limited time, I will provide a quick overview of our findings across 6 cities and 5 countries. So based on our ongoing work on 1.5-degree lifestyles, we find that the carbon footprints among and within countries can vary significantly. For example, in Kyoto, Sao Paulo, and New Delhi, the average carbon footprints are either more or less than the national carbon footprint. So the city-specific approach where the consumption and production meets provides a good opportunity to look into or to promote sustainable lifestyles. The city-specific approach also has some advantage in enabling to identify what are the hotspots across different lifestyle domains. For example, the mobility, housing, food, goods and services, and leisure. Having said that, there are a few challenges posed by choosing city as the scale of interventions for sustainable or 1.5-degree lifestyles. And in the next panel discussion, we will look into a bit more detail into this. So our approach, as Kojima-san mentioned, was first we took a city-specific approach. Then we identified what are the hotspots of hotspots across different domains in those cities. And for each of the 6 cities, we identified options for carbon footprint reduction across each domain. So in Kyoto, Japan, we identified 65 options for lifestyle carbon footprint reduction. And our findings, and of course, we introduced those options to project participants through workshops. And our findings are quite easy to adopt. But options with high carbon footprint mitigation potential, for example, you can see the carbon neutral houses, have a bit lower adoption rate among the participants. Why? Because those options are not readily available at the moment. And for those options, supporting measures by the governments and the business sectors are key. So when we talk about sustainable lifestyles or 1.5-degree lifestyles, what we want to say is that really the supporting measures from the government and business sector is equally important. And this, while the households should be aware of their carbon footprints and should take actions to reduce their carbon footprint. Moving ahead, one of the findings was that the drivers or the motivations for adopting sustainable 1.5-degree lifestyles are both environmental as well as other drivers. So this is a testimonial by a participant from Yokohama, where not wasting resources and not wasting goods was one of the key driver for moving towards sustainable lifestyle. So it is really important to take into account different drivers such as the environmental, religious, economic, cultural, as well as moral driver, and promoting 1.5-degree lifestyles by all means. Our project confirms that through consumption-based approaches, it is possible to reduce the carbon footprint. In cities like Nonthaburi, Thailand, New Delhi, and Sao Paulo, Brazil, it is possible to achieve the target of the 2.5 tons lifestyle by 2030 towards limiting the global warming to 1.5 degrees. However, in cities like Cape Town, Kyoto, and Yokohama, we also found that the only consumption side approaches or consumption-based approaches are not adequate. And transformative systemic shifts at the production side, such as moving towards renewable energy, as well as technological innovation, are really essential for achieving the target of the 2.5 ton lifestyle. So as a recommendation from this project, the first step from where to start to promote 1.5-degree lifestyles is to look into city-specific catalog of options, like what options could be adopted given the culture in that city, the available infrastructure. So through this project, we had such lifestyle catalogs for all the 6 cities. And we found that what this options catalog does is that it gives opportunity for the citizens and the residents to choose different options across food, housing, mobility, goods, services, and leisure, which fits their personal circumstances and along with reducing the carbon footprint. So having a choice of options is really important. One of our key message through this project is that the transition pathway towards 1.5-degree lifestyles are diverse, and collaborative efforts among households, business, and government is the way forward. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Aditi and Kojima-san, of course, for sharing the findings of the study. It's interesting to see yeah, what are the options, and I think we knew, but this confirms that each city situation is also different, and well, we're taking the transition path as a multi-stakeholder effort, which was also said in the morning. And now perhaps we can go to Luca from Hattorkul Institute Research Program Manager, who will explain a bit deeper the policy recommendations and what has been done through, for example, the competition that brought also interesting efforts together from different cities that are addressed in this project. And let me share with you that Luca has actually 10 years of experience in the topic, in the area of sustainability. He has been before at the European Environment Agency, Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. He has been a fellow there. And he's now working in the interface between science and policy with a focus on the links between energy scenarios, environmental impacts, social aspects like inequality, social and economic stability. So I guess, Luca, you will also touch upon the equitable way of dealing with future lifestyles. Some need more, some need less. So how to strike the balance, and the word to you.
Thank you so much, Burju, for the great introduction. Let me just share my screen as I have a few slides. And thank you so much for the opportunity to present here at this event. As Burju said, I will briefly talk about the policy brief that will be one of the outputs from this project, and also on the winners of the multimedia contest that was also part of this project. So the policy brief will include recommendations based on what we observed from the citizen co-engagement workshops and the household experiments. So we are trying to translate this into messages to policymakers, basically at 3 different levels: messages at the city level, at the country level, and also across these different levels. So things that could be done when it comes to cooperation across countries and across cities. But I will not go into many details about the specificity, for example, of each city, as later on we will have a panel with all the local partners, and I'm sure they will be more than happy to discuss what have been the specificities of their particular cases. I will just touch when it comes to the brief on what we learned from a more kind of overarching perspective. So what we learned from this experience, from this project, and what will be at the core also of this policy brief is really how powerful and effective is the 1.5-degree lifestyles approach, or the concept of 1.5-degree lifestyles. So we observed that in practice, it really is an effective concept to bridge policy and people. So to translate policy targets, science-based policy targets, of course, to real action and possibly foster effective change into really practical terms. So from one hand, we have policy targets, and then by interacting and engaging with people, we have a lot of information, a lot of essential indications of what could be done in terms of what lifestyle options could be adopted in the different cultural contexts and in the different individual contexts, of course. What are the adoption rates that we could expect for different lifestyle options in different cities? What are the reduction potentials? What are the barriers that people face every day when tries to implement lifestyle changes of this kind? And of course, what are the solutions? What are the solutions that are more feasible in the different contexts? And also what is needed from the people in terms of enabling conditions that have to be provided by policy, by business, and by the underlying economic system, if we wish, in order for these individual changes to actually be effectively implemented. And then from the people, we also learn what are the initiatives that are already out there. And through the multimedia contest and through the scenario exercise that was also part of this project, we developed visions for the future for the different cities, and this will all be reflected into the policy brief. So what we really learned, if we had to kind of extract one core concept from this project, is how well the 1.5 degree lifestyles work as a concept that bridges policy and people. So I've tried here to sum up kind of the 5 main messages or recommendations to policymakers that we will give in the policy brief from a more overarching perspective. Then, of course, we will go into more detailed messages when it comes to the cities. But from a more overarching perspective, I summed up the key messages into these 5 steps: mainstream, engage, enable, act, and achieve. Now, to mainstream, as I said, we have seen how effective is the concept and the approach of the 1.5 degree lifestyles. Is a fundamental complement to the Paris Agreement, to this kind of more general or global targets that might mean little to some people, but then when they are translated into practical action to the 1.5 degree lifestyles approach, then they become something that is more tangible and something that people know how they can act upon. So what we really need is to mainstream this concept, and what we will ask to policymakers is to further mainstream this concept into the policy vocabulary, into the policy dialogues, and also, possibly creating policy working groups on 1.5 degree lifestyles and things like that, and initiatives like that, because we really believe that this concept can really be key when it comes to climate change mitigation and climate change action. The second point is to engage. We have seen how important it is to engage with citizens. We knew already that from social science research before, but it really is essential, especially when it comes to lifestyles, to listen to the people and to engage with the citizens, to really know in the different cases what are the specificities, what are the barriers, what are the solutions, what are the needs of people from different income groups, for example, or from different parts of the world and different cultural backgrounds. And then we can identify what are the most effective and what are the most feasible options in each case. The third step is enable. As has already been noted by the presenters before me, lifestyle change is not just a matter of individual willingness to change. We need to provide the enabling conditions for this change to happen. And this enabling condition, this enabling environment is a responsibility in part of policymakers to make. So we have seen that high adoption rates are achievable, but only if the enabling conditions are provided. So the business sector, policymakers, and all other stakeholders have to really take their responsibility here and create the enabling conditions for people to then be able to contribute effectively to climate change mitigation. The next step is act, and act where we identified, in particular across cities, food, mobility, and housing as among the consumption categories responsible for most of the carbon emissions from household consumption. This is in very general term, but we also were able to identify more specifically specific subcategories and specific aspects of consumption in each different city where we should act more effectively. So we will provide policymakers with indication what are the hotspots when it comes to carbon emissions of consumption in the different cities and countries. And this, of course, is very informative and useful for the policy process when it comes to climate change mitigation. And the last step is to achieve. So once you're mainstream, once you're talking about 1.5 degree lifestyles and implementing those also in the policy discourse, you have engaged with citizens, you have created the enabling conditions, you know where to act and what kind of consumption categories needs more attention. Then you have to achieve, then you have to make the change happen. And we have seen that some of the reductions in cities that are achievable by adopting 1.5 degree lifestyles could lead to a reduction of emission that is in line with the targets of the Paris Agreement that, as Burcu said, are particularly difficult to achieve on paper as they require very, very sharp and very, very high reduction of consumption emissions in many cases. But this is not only a story of sacrifices. It's not just a story about, you know, consuming less or consuming better. It is also a story, and it's also a change that will lead to many co-benefits, in terms of personal, community, ecological well-being, as well as economic benefits. So we also need to tell this other side of the story. It's not just about sacrificing our way of living. It is also achieving a future where, you know, well-being will be increased and the quality of life will be better for us all. And there are many, of course, co-benefits that things like, for example, switching to a more sustainable diet imply when it comes to health benefits and so on. So those are the overarching messages. And let me just now announce the winners of the multimedia contest. So the multimedia contest was launched across all countries. We had 30 entries in total. We invited creatives and influencers and other people to provide, you know, their inputs and to participate to this multimedia contest by providing videos, photo projects, and other initiatives that they are doing for implementing 1.5 degree lifestyles. We had 30 entries in totals. We selected 9 winners. Winners were given a micro grant, and they also had to outline how they will use this micro grant. So this is also another item of impact, if we wish, of the project. We will be able also to track, you know, how this multimedia contest, now these micro grants will be then used to actually achieve some further actions for implementing 1.5 degree lifestyles. So amongst the 9 winners, 6 were video projects, 1 were a photo project. We have a microsite, and we have a manga series that was created for the Japanese multimedia contest. For Cape Town, the award was given to Mzansi Organics in the person of Ahmad Gamieldien. Mzansi Organic is a not-for-profit organization that works with local farmers on sustainable food production. For Kyoto, the project awarded, or the entry awarded, was for the project Feast, where Maximilian Spiegelberg and his partners developed a tool for creating sustainable school lunch menus. For New Delhi, Mithun Mukherjee and Sunita Katyal were awarded. Those are 2 separate video projects from individuals experimenting, living a 1.5 degree lifestyle, and that are advocating for a more sustainable New Delhi. For Nontamburi, the prize was given to Ananyakon Pulsilapa, which created educational material and material for community engagement. For the city of Sao Paulo, we had 3 winners, Aline Martins de Carvalho, Maria Carolina Bombonato Prado Pinto de Moraes, and Olga Kovalenko. The first 2 are 2 video projects from influencers that work on sustainable lifestyle. And the last one was a project from students at the University of Sao Paulo on sustainable food choices. And last but not least, from Yokohama, we had we had Naoto Akimoto, that created a manga series with a vision on future modes of transport and addresses climate change issues. Very creative, this last one in particular, I would say. And I invite all of you to access the winning entries and to find more details about these projects on the link that I will post now on the chat. And thanks again so much.
Thank you so much, Luca Kosheme, for the introduction to, it's a very quick introduction to the policy takeaways. Engage, enable, act, achieve, starting with mainstream. Great scheme. I think it's also very interesting for the eClay members to look into this policy brief. We will be looking forward to disseminate it. And well, also check out the winners in the chat box. I think Jenny Roman from Hot or Cool has already posted the link, and I'm seeing there are already some questions coming up. For example, for Cape Town, well, there's a question: why is the carbon footprint so high? Maybe my colleague Jokudu Guya can touch upon that, and of course the inequalities, looking from the consumption side. But I think well, Wimlando Ja is going to be taking over now, a really diverse set of participants in our panel. And let me tell, Wim is one of the leading environmentalists of India. And he's the founder of and executive director of the not-for-profit organization Swecha. Maybe you heard of it, in sustainable consumption production area, quite well known. And he's of course part of a member of the lifestyles and education program of On Planets Network. So I'm happy to now listen to all the learnings and takeaways and the challenges from those 6 cities. Wim, to you.
Thanks a lot. And you know, it's indeed very heartening to hear different perspectives that actually was shared just now. And I think also I've been part of this particular program for all these, you know, the research project across 6 cities. So I'm not just a moderator for this session, but also a participant in this entire study that was actually done in 6 different cities. I think what's been shared right now in last 30 minutes, that the reason why cities are extremely important, because cities where what Garrett also actually spoke about, that cities are actually where it's the intersection of consumption and production. I think Aditi also mentioned that. And also, you know, a city is small enough to really understand smaller details, and big enough to really extrapolate the data and understand policy and pattern in policy or pattern in behavior, both human behavior as well as state behavior or government behavior in that sense. Let me quickly introduce my panelists today, as in these are 6 great people that I've actually worked with for more than 12 months now. It's been a long journey coming up with this study. So we actually have Bruno from Sao Paulo. You know, some of you would know their work. Also Jokudu Guya from Cape Town. We have Chen Lui from Yokohama, Kenji from Kyoto. We have Ploy Pasicha from Nonthaburi, and my colleague Ashim from New Delhi. You know, we have very little time. We only have approximately 26 minutes. So therefore, we're only looking at 3 broad questions in our discussion today. And we'll try to look at how, you know, why these cities, why sustainability, what are those choices? Broadly, that's what actually it is. The first question, and I'm you know, the way we've actually planned this entire panel discussion, and IGES and other organizers. The first question that we have is, what is the significant benefit of addressing sustainable lifestyle at the scale of cities? Because as I said, as in cities small enough and big enough, you know, because that's where the actual impact is happening. That's where 70% of footprint is at the household level, and clubbing also all the households is what makes a city. So I would like to first invite Bruno from Sao Paulo to really share thoughts around what is it, why the significant benefit of addressing sustainable lifestyle at the scale of cities.
Thanks, Vin. thanks for your introduction. And so answering the first question based on experience of São Paulo, first, it's important to point out that addressing sustainable lifestyles in general, they result not only in direct benefits as the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but also in co-benefits in areas like energy, health, well-being, food, and many others. And those areas, they're usually emphasized at the scale of cities, once cities are where the impacts of climate change are more felt. So when it comes at that scale, you can address the individualities of the context, acting in a more personalized way, dealing with specific variables of the context, and therefore you can provide more accurate conditions to address those lifestyles. For example, investments in infrastructure can make the city more inclusive, reaching outlying regions and offering mobility alternatives, especially to those who don't have many of them available. And in that direction, we see that solutions that are based on the specificity of the city context, they tend to result in better outcomes. And from an NGO point of view, as Akatu Institute, we see that that approach helps to better understand the citizens' needs and their lifestyles, and consequently to develop a relationship closer to the community. And that will result in more efficient campaigns and projects, and will also lead to more conscious citizens. But however, within cities, especially like São Paulo, a city of huge population, extremely diverse, it's common to find subgroups or different realities across the municipality. So and they usually need customized or careful and sometimes even complex solutions because of that diversity. But despite of that, I think that in the end, cities are a more grounded scale to assess lifestyle carbon footprint. So that's one experience from São Paulo. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. And just for everyone, Bruno is an environmental engineer. And it's very interesting that every time we look at sustainable lifestyles, and every time we think that it's a lot of science, but it's a lot of social science. It's a lot of data. It's a mix of many things: human behavior, the science, the expedition in science. All of it together is where perhaps lifestyle or sustainable lifestyle needs to lead into. The next speaker that we actually have, and answering the same question, which is about why cities and why is it important to address sustainable lifestyle at the level of city, is Jokudu from Cape Town. And she's been working with ICLEI. She works on urban issues. I think someone in our discussion also asked a very, very specific question around Cape Town. And I saw that you were actually typing an answer. I'm not sure whether you've actually typed already, but it would be interesting to really look at what does city mean to you, or what does sustainable lifestyle in the context of a city mean to you, and specific to Cape Town, as Aditi and Kojima-san were also saying that each city is different. So how is Cape Town different, and how is this study important for Cape Town in that sense?
Thank you very much. Yes, I'll definitely respond from a Cape Town perspective, and I will continue typing my response to the question in the chat after presenting. So in response to the question, individuals definitely can reduce their carbon impact at the household level by adopting a number of low carbon intensive activities. And I think in her introduction, Ms. Garrett responded to this point quite well and emphasized it. But the significant benefit of addressing sustainable lifestyles at the city scale is that opportunity to achieve greater impact for the entire city. And this is something that Dr. Luca also touched on and expressed when he talked about enablers. So for the city of Cape Town, the current key contributors to high carbon emissions are public transport and electricity from non-renewable energy sources. Many individuals use private cars to navigate the city, and then the main source of energy is from coal. But through this project, we explored activities that individual citizens could undertake to support the vision of a low carbon future for Cape Town. And the results showed that activities such as adopting a vegetarian diet or adopting a plant-based diet, switching to gas instead of using electricity, carpooling, and using public transport have the greatest potential to reduce the entire city's carbon emissions. And while each of these require individual action and shifts in behavior from like high consumption to low consumption, as well as making that switch from using or consuming products that have low impact, this requires the correct infrastructure and uptake, or having the financial means to access sustainable resources. So using the example of public transport, for example, this is a service that is provided at the city scale, but without adequate infrastructure, individual commuters are less likely to make or support the citywide transition to using buses and minibus taxis. And then on the other hand, when it comes to, for example, the adoption of plant-based diets, this is an option that's very readily available, and that middle income to a high income earners can take on. But when it came to developing a vision for a sustainable city, a strong position that many urban residents expressed while we were conducting the project emphasized the importance of acknowledging low income earners and in Cape Town, and how they do not necessarily have the same level of access to plant-based diets. And at the city level, both the transition to sustainable lifestyles as well as the socio-economic challenges, these can be tackled simultaneously. So for example, community gardens can be offered as solutions to accessing vegetables and fruits, but it's also an opportunity to invest in urban farming at the city scale and to provide improved access to healthier plant-based options. And so the overall key need is creating those enabling environments to support individuals to adopt low carbon impact lifestyles. And through action from both your city government as well as from individuals, the two groups sort of meet each other halfway and create greater impact in supporting your sustainable futures from both the environmental perspective, which is reducing your carbon emissions, but also that social perspective, which is addressing your socioeconomic challenges. I hope this response also touched on to the question that was put in the chat, which basically expressed concern as well, not just about the high impact of the high, if I could just go quickly to the question, the high footprint in Cape Town, but also the challenges that I expressed from a social economic point of view. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think, as someone also said just now, that some people are consuming a lot and some people are consuming very less. And that's where we have to really, as a society, as a civilization, when we talk about sustainable lifestyle, we have to have enough for everyone forever. And that's what the discussion is. Now, the second very, very important question, once we are actually talking about sustainable lifestyle, is that, are there limitations of city-specific approaches? Because I'm sure, as I said, and as everyone shared, that every city is different. There's diversity between cities, diversity amongst cities in that sense, also from a research point of view, policy point of view, and also actual action and implementation on the ground point of view. Why is it important, and what are the limitations of city-specific approaches? And we actually have two people to answer this question, and we've actually kept this for Japan. And the first respondent to this question will actually be Chen Lui. She's a senior researcher at IGES and a PhD in biosphere informatics from Kyoto University. So, Dr. Chen, if I may call you doctor, because you are a PhD, as a researcher and also as someone who also propagates action, taking research to actual actionable, implication. What are the limitations of this approach? Why just city, and why not a state or a country, or why not a smaller, a community? So how do we justify that entire question, research challenge, and otherwise a challenge?
Thank you, Vin. First of all, I would like to say that I fully agree that there are many benefits and co-benefits to be gained by engaging in a sustainable lifestyle on a city level. As a colleague has mentioned, as you have mentioned, regarding the question, what is the limitation of the city-specific approach? I'd like to make 3 main points based on the case of Yokohama City. Firstly, is the geographical factors. When we try to put in the 65 mitigation options into practice with the citizen of Yokohama, the scale of the city is sometimes too small and sometimes too big. On the too small side, for example, Yokohama is a bedtime city for Tokyo. So with many people leaving for Tokyo early in the morning and return late at night, meanwhile, Yokohama residents enjoy spending the weekdays and holidays at the neighboring beach or mountains where there is a quite limited public transport accessibilities. I mean, since people live and move in a very wide area, barriers to a sustainable lifestyle cannot be overcome without the support of the neighboring cities. On the other hand, as for the two big issue, for example, Yokohama is a city of hills. So some areas are suitable for bicycle, while some areas are not. Also, there are many options such as car sharing, neighborhood leisure, local food, may be more efficient and cost effective at a community level. Secondly, I want to mention the cultural factors, as you said. Yokohama City is a global port city and is very multicultural. Lifestyle here is a very diverse and one-fit-all city level approach pose limitations. For example, Yokohama is the site of a famous Chinatown. I think it's very difficult to promote IH cooking system or electricity, zero energy housing, because gas is very important for making delicious Chinese food. Also, the Western food is quite popular here, and the transition to a complete vegetarian diet, I think is maybe quite difficult here. Thirdly, I like to mention the rapid development of online platform, which was quite accelerated by the COVID-19. Our lifestyle become more virtual online. This is like to be less impact of the physical city on the people lives. Lastly, as your question, how to overcome, I would like to suggest to promote city partnership and maybe initiative on the community or platform focus basis. But of course, it depends on the case. Thank you, that's all for my set.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I think, it's important, as in what you said, that cities actually have diversity in many, many ways. And there are many people, like in your case, as you said, the businesses or the port city or different kind of ethnicity converging in a city, and therefore it becomes a very important point. Now, if you could also hear something about Kyoto, a very, very beautiful city, the model. So we have Kenji Asakawa, who is the program manager at the City Task Force and Strategic Management Office at IGES. Again, a Master of Urban Environment Engineering in Architectural Engineering. So as per you, Dr. Kenji, yep. Again, as in what are the limitations? What would we miss? What do we miss out when we actually do a city-centric approach? Because we all, of course, because our research is city-centric, so we will, of course, always praise our approach. But what are the limitations? What are the challenges of this particular approach that we're actually following? And of course, in specific to Kyoto, if you could actually talk about it, also specific to this research and this study that we have actually done.
Thank you very much, Vim. So yeah, let me divide this question into two parts. The first one is the limitation of tackling lifestyle reform at the city level in general. And the second one is Kyoto's specific unique limitation in that aspect. So in the response to the first question, it's very difficult to estimate the CO2 reduction potential of each lifestyle option for each city due to the lack of city-specific statistical data. So the different cities have different transport infrastructure and building structures. So the current baseline emission varies from city to city, of course. For example, in densely populated cities such as Kyoto and Yokohama, where the railway network is well developed and it's very convenient to use railways. But in the case of less densely populated area, some rural towns, the public transport network is not so developed, of course, and the citizens frequently use their own cars. In such a case, the carbon footprint reduction potential for modal shift to public transport should be lower in Tokyo and Yokohama because they already used public transport, and in rural towns, it's very higher. The potential is very higher, but it's often difficult to estimate the difference accurately. So in terms of how to overcome that limitation, I think the basic idea is conduct a household survey in the city level. And but this survey may be very expensive, but that city can collaborate with neighboring cities, and in the similar situation, that city can get a larger sample for less cost per city. And the second question, Kyoto unique specific limitation. Kyoto City, as you know, Kyoto City needs to protect traditional architecture and urban landscape, and it makes renovation of walls and windows of the buildings more expensive than the average. But it's difficult to install rooftop, and it's very difficult to install rooftop PV panels on the top to maintain the traditional shape of the roof. So in order to overcome that limitation, I think we will have to wait until the renovation techniques development in the future, and it can keep the shape of traditional buildings, and it become cheaply available in the near future. But considering the rapid growth of the decarbonization market in Japan in recent years, we can hope such low carbon technologies will be available at affordable price in near future. Yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot again, Dr. Kenji. I think now the question that we actually have further to question number one, question number two is actually looking at, what is the recommendation for policy instruments on sustainable lifestyles to incorporate the voices of people? What meaning to say that a lot of times when we look at policy making, it's a very top down. A lot of times we think that the voices of people are the actual citizens on the ground, or perhaps when we say citizens on the ground, we also mean not so powerful citizens on the ground, or people who have, whose agency is limited. How do we actually get their voices? And more so in democracies or in developing countries, it's important for us to really understand. So we have two speakers for this. We have Chloe, Pasicha from Nonthaburi, and Ashim from Delhi. I'll go to Pasicha first, answering that question, that what is the recommendation for policy instruments on sustainable lifestyle, and how do we actually make sure that it is not somebody's plan or somebody's approach, but everybody's plan and everybody's approach? How do we make it everybody's business and not just business of a few?
All right, thank you for your question. Here, from the participatory approach, we have learned that social values here and the governance were raised okay, as important drivers for low carbon society transformation. And through these drivers, 4 possible scenarios were formed, 1, 2, 3, 4 here. And participants later named each scenario here after the storyline discussion. So at the end, they show the mutual agreement on the most optimistic scenario here, which is be green and walk the talk lifestyles, which is the way that they want to see the future. So this is a combination of the local autonomous and the moderate and diversity local economy here. So, and from this scenario, the core vision proposed by participants from the floor include values and practice here. So values and practices have been identified as a message of positivity here. And to me, this seems to be a promising opportunity and in line with the existing Thailand Vision 2050, Thailand's Low Carbon Society Vision 2030, and a 5-year non-Taburi development plan. So let's move to the opposite side, okay? So after participants envisioned the scenario and vision, they co-created, let me move this. They co-created the transformative learning model based on 2 questions. So how do we get there to the future we want? And what ingredients should be put into this path? So from that, we came up with this transformative learning model that includes 6 important modules here. And to me, the gap between the box number 3 here and the box number 5 is crucial because I think this is a main pain point for setting up the policy. And because the interaction of these 2 modules, stakeholders and co-creation of useful knowledge, is crucial, but often absent in the real world. So there's often a preference to adopt an ambitious policy agenda without considering its local knowledge and feasibility available. So it is challenging to fill this gap here. However, this requires multi-dimension resources and skills. So the right man, right, time and funding are needed. Most importantly, trust must be built between these 2 boxes and to really shake and move to the low carbon lifestyle society. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ploy. And just for everyone, Ploy is also head of Department of Environmental Science, Faculty of Science at Chulalongkorn University. And she's received the Royal Thai Government Scholarship to pursue her doctoral degree in soil and water science at University of Florida. It's good sometimes, it's a different approach to hear the speaker first and then get their bio so that you judge them based on what they've spoken rather than the long bio. See the way I hide my error of not reading the bio first.
Thank you.
I'm going to read the bio for the next speaker, who's actually my colleague, Ashim. Ashim works with Swechha. He's a musician. He's actually been working on this particular research for all these months. And he's also an alumni of US Department of State International Exchange Programs Network. Ashim, the question that I have to you, again, the same thing, that how do we actually make it everybody's business? I think the challenge that we all actually face, Ashim, is that people who are the citizens, their wisdom is important, and not just asking them questions because their wisdom is important, their participation is important, and more than anything else, the ownership to their city or city's plan or governance is extremely important. So, the same question, if I could just toss it to you, that what is the recommendation that you have? How do we make incorporate the voices of people specific to New Delhi? Because again, New Delhi, as Sao Paulo or as Cape Town, has extremely rich people and powerful people with agency. And then at the same time, we actually have extremely poor people also from similar issues. By the way, interestingly, when we think of climate change, we think climate change affects everybody, but perhaps climate change affects different people differently. So a water crisis for a poor person is different from water crisis for a rich person. I must tell you, sorry, I'm taking 30 seconds extra. Right now, I'm actually sitting in Goa, one of the cleanest so-called cities or towns that we actually have in the country. I just arrived here yesterday. But vulnerability to climate change, the cloud burst that's actually happening, and perhaps people with agency like us can sit in a house and make ourselves rain safe or cloud burst safe. But people in the field, people who are actually sowing their paddy field right now, they are getting devastated in that sense. So how do we when we make city plans, how do we make it everybody's business? The question is to you, Ashim, specific to New Delhi.
Thank you, Vimlendu. And first of all, it's a privilege and honor to be part of a panel like this and to get inputs from everyone. So thank you for having me here today. I'm going to quickly, just as Vimlendu already mentioned, I wanted to give a broad background into the city of Delhi. Of course, it's one of the largest cities, not just in India, but in the world, has a booming population. And in the last 10 years, what we've also seen is there's a move towards rapid urbanization. It's a developing city. And what that's done to the city, so to speak, has also put a huge burden on the existing resources and infrastructure of the city. So while the population has increased because there are a lot of migrants in particular who have come in search of a job, in search of livelihood in the city of Delhi, we've also seen an extreme amount of pressure on existing resources in the city that has not developed at the same pace as rapid urbanization in the city, so to speak. So one of the major challenges at this point has been the demographic profile of the city. As Vimlendu mentioned, we have people who are rich and powerful, but there's also over 1/3 of the population of the city that actually lives in informal settlements and in slums and don't have access to even clean drinking water on a daily basis, or don't have access to electricity, 24 hours of electricity, so to speak. So that being one of the bigger challenges. The other challenge is that that the citizens who are part of both the workshop and the household experiments that we organized and actually helped us develop the city scenario for 2030 and vision for 2050, they spoke about how some of them who already practice certain lifestyles, sustainable lifestyles, such as reusing waste at home or practicing composting or doing community-based activities that are linked with sustainable lifestyles, they are often name-called or shamed for what they do. So which sort of establishes that there is a gap in understanding in terms of how we can make sustainable lifestyles both cool, interesting, attractive, and, as mentioned earlier at the beginning, irresistible, so to speak. So how can that, for the masses, for everyone in the city, how can it actually become irresistible is something that was spoken about a lot in the recommendations, and how the government or the state can play an active role, or how businesses can actually play an active role in implementing this. Another thing to bring up was the lifestyle options that we actually developed. A lot of them come with a sense of privilege, so to speak, again. So, for example, installing rooftop solar, or looking at using motion sensor lights, or eating a vegan-based diet or organic food. Right now, a lot of these things, there is an affordability issue that comes. So that's another challenge that exists within the city, looking at the larger population and integrating sustainable lifestyles for everyone and moving towards that sustainable future. In terms of recommendations, one of the points that came up a lot, both via the citizens that were part of the workshop as well as the discussions we had while doing the household experiments, is to look at how we can actually implement policies in such a way that they are data-centric and data-driven. So you actually know what are the consequences towards these different options. So when they were actually able to see, how much footprint can you mitigate by using bicycles, or by teleworking, or by eating a plant-based diet, you link that to how it actually has a direct impact on climate change, on the environment of the city, and also how your actions can move towards building a more sustainable city. So if we create that data-centric approach, if the government plays more role, both vis-a-vis awareness, education in schools and institutions through that data, through that scientific research, as well as in terms of policy making, that goes a long way towards building a more sustainable future for the city. And the second is, of course, infrastructure development. Right now, Delhi's mobility, food, and housing are three domains that have the highest footprint and have maximum amount of hotspots. So if you look at Delhi's existing public transport, if you look at the number of fleet of buses that we have, another thing to mention also is that people, there's an aspiration towards owning a private vehicle, or having one's own vehicle and not using public transport at this point. But citizens at the same time also highlighted that they would opt for public transport provided the infrastructure is safe. There are enough buses, there is enough connectivity of the buses, so that they can use that kind of infrastructure. Similarly, for switching your diet to a vegan diet or an organic based diet, or a vegetarian based diet, you need affordability is again an issue that comes in there. So these were some of the points again brought in by citizens in terms of how we can look at infrastructure development and a multi-stakeholder approach where citizens' voices are implemented, particularly those who lack that sense of agency. Their voices are brought in when it comes to development of the master plan of the city. Their voices are heard in particular. They are aware of what's happening in terms of policy making, and infrastructure at the same time is being built to cope with the city's needs, because we are reaching a stage where the next 20 years or the next 10 years will invariably shape the future of the city and where we want to head in the next 10-20 years vis-a-vis ecological resources, infrastructure of the city, and moving towards a sustainable future. So that's all for me, just listing down some of the recommendations as well as what are some of the challenges right now that the city of Delhi faces.
Thank you, Ashim, for sharing your insight from New Delhi. I think we finished all the three questions. I think there was something in the chat box in one of the question and answer boxes about understanding slums, understanding people in the slums who live in, it was specific to Sao Paulo, but I think that question is applicable to not just Sao Paulo, but to Cape Town, but to New Delhi, but to many other cities in our world, that how do we actually take sustainable lifestyle agenda or say a prescription of sustainable lifestyle to the poorest? And my brief answer to that question is that the fault or the real, if I can call harming the planet or ruining the planet a crime, the crime is committed by the richest of the rich and not by the poorest of the poor. Poorer people are most of the time at the receiving end of climate change in many, many ways, or of everything, the impact that we're talking about. So each time we solicit good behavior from the poor, I think we need to also ask that question, that where is the problem actually? The problem is not with the poor as much as it is with the rich of our world, the high consumption hotspots as individuals, as societies, as cultures. And that answer of Cape Town again, that someone had actually asked, that why is it so that Cape Town has highest per capita this thing, while it's actually in many parts of Cape Town, there's extreme poverty at the same time. And same applies for New Delhi. So therefore, sometimes we will have to strike a balance, that what do we expect? What kind of good behavior are we expecting? And also in developing countries, a lot of times the issue is sustainability, at the same time hunger. How do we actually tread that point, that how do we feed people and at the same time imagine a future that is actually equitable, just, and at the same time is actually green? So thanks everyone for participating in this discussion, and not just this discussion, this study that we've actually had across 6 cities, the team from IGES, UNEP, everyone, Hotocool, everyone who's actually been part of the study. Thank you, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to moderate this session. Over to you, Mr. Nsa.
Mr. Vimja, thank you so much for your excellent moderation. Harvesting everything so smoothly from all over the world. I think we learned a lot. I have taken a lot of notes. So excited to take this that's a small list of learnings, I would say, to the scale in the Equalay network. I think, as my colleague Jokudu said, the individual action is needed, but we need the correct infrastructure and the financial resources. So it is great that we have, I think, also some tips, maybe how to collect data. There are questions coming in on that. I'm seeing there are a lot of challenges also on the role of the city in providing an equitable infrastructure, providing the products and services in collaboration with business to address the affordability question that you beautifully explained, Wim. I think what is left to me is to really congratulate everyone and ask everyone to turn on their cameras so we can have a family photo of the project, as this is the global event of the future lifestyles. Before I think we give the closing word also to Kojima-san. My colleagues will be taking a screenshot. Thank you. And thank you so much and congratulations for this initial step towards really pointing at the important role of local governments and the gigantic role given by the national governments to them. So I think, yes, as I said, the word to Kojima-san to close. Thank you.
Okay, please, thank you very much. And thank you very much. And then also congratulations to everybody. And then particularly Beam's nice moderation. We enjoyed a very vivid, the panel discussion sessions. Thank you very much. So yeah, so it's very rich information we learned through today's event. And then in general, I think we are successful in demonstrating like a benefit and the importance of like a city level approach, which try to like reflect like a specific condition of each city. And then also the importance and the benefit of participatory approach to reflect the citizens' opinion. But also today's session highlights, of course, many challenges, difficulties of this approach. So, okay, so we know there is a benefit and the strengths of this approach, but then to fully utilize the strengths of this approach, we now have to endeavor to overcome many challenges. And then, but yeah, so today we have a lot of issues. And then particularly, I think also I try to follow the questions from the audience. And then one very important question is like to like inequality issue, like to reflect minority or like vulnerable people's voice. Do we have a proper tool? And then my personal answer is unfortunately currently no, but because some cases like actually through this project, many cities face a difficulty to collect workshop participants. And quite often these like minority people or like vulnerable people not actually in a very disadvantaged situation to participate in this kind of activity due to maybe time limitation, or in case of like online workshop, lack of proper equipment, etc. So it's really a big challenge, but very important issue. So yeah, we not only have a very rich discussion among the the panelists and then speakers, but also from the feedback from audience, we can further enrich this discussion. Then, so I hope this event provide a good opportunity to start further like collaborative effort by everybody, including the audience. Then, but yeah, finally, anyway, thank you very much for everybody. And then I'm very happy. So this event was very successful. So thank you again.
Wonderful, Kojima-san. Yeah. Thank you. And we will be continuing sharing. I think there's a lot of content coming in. There are blogs, there are visuals. There's going to be a microsite of all the graphical content you have also seen. And we will be also preparing a summary of this session, answering some of your questions, hopefully also there on the ICLEI Circulars platform that my colleague will post. So please subscribe to the newsletter so you can hear more updates. And well, thank you again. And see you in Malmö next year. This was a part of the World Congress of ICLEI. Thank you and bye-bye.